There is a hidden, deliberate reason why your body feels fundamentally broken, why your energy is hollow, and why modern pills only mask the agonizing cries of your dying cells. For over a century, a staggering biological cover-up has been quietly executed in plain sight, systematically erasing the most terrifyingly effective, rapid-healing botanicals from human memory. The towering empires of modern pharmacology did not merely invent new synthetic drugs, they actively buried the ancient, miraculous plants that possessed the raw power to arrest severe hemorrhaging in seconds, instantly neutralize lethal infections, and aggressively stitch torn flesh back together before the sun could even set. We have been conditioned to believe that healing must be a slow, agonizing, and expensive process, a lie designed to keep us perpetually dependent on a system that profits from our chronic decay. Welcome to Lone Oak Remedies, where we tear down the sterile, synthetic illusions of modern medicine and descend into the forgotten, shadowed catacombs of history to reclaim the divine, stolen alchemy of our ancestors. Today, we are blowing the dust off heavily censored medical texts to resurrect 10 lost medicinal plants that possess the documented biochemical power to heal the human vessel almost instantaneously. Our descent into this suppressed botanical archive begins on the blood-soaked soils of ancient battlefields, where survival was not measured in months, but in desperate, fleeing seconds. Before the invention of synthetic coagulants and emergency trauma surgery, warriors and field medics relied on a ubiquitous, feathery weed known to the ancients as herba militaris, or the military herb, which we now casually dismiss as yarrow. History tells us that the mythical Achilles used this exact plant to instantly staunch the bleeding of his soldiers during the siege of Troy, but the literal biological mechanics of this plant are far more terrifying than the myth. When human flesh is violently torn and arterial blood begins to rapidly escape, the modern body goes into immediate shock. The ancient medics possessed the knowledge that crushing the dark green leaves of wild yarrow and packing them directly into a gaping wound triggered an instantaneous, violent biological reaction. Yarrow is heavily saturated with a highly complex alkaloid known as achillene, a compound that aggressively commands the blood to instantly coagulate. It does not wait for the body's slow, natural clotting cascade to begin. It physically forces the red blood cells to rapidly bind together, creating an impenetrable biological seal over severed blood vessels in a matter of moments. It is an instant, life-saving tourniquet grown from the earth, a botanical trauma surgeon that literally stops the shadow of death in its tracks, allowing the wounded to rise and breathe again. Stepping away from the chaotic violence of ancient empires and into the quiet, shadowed apothecary gardens of early medieval monasteries, we encounter a root so aggressively powerful at regenerating human tissue that it was known simply as knitbone. Today, if you fracture a limb or tear a deep structural ligament, you are prescribed months of immobilization and synthetic painkillers that slowly toxify your liver. But the ancient monks possessed the thick, black roots of true, wild comfrey. They understood that the human skeleton and muscular matrix require specific, highly concentrated chemical signals to rebuild. When the heavy root of the comfrey plant was crushed into a dark, mucilaginous poultice and bound tightly around a shattered bone or a violently sprained joint, it did not just soothe the pain, it initiated a terrifyingly rapid cellular replication. Comfrey contains overwhelming concentrations of allantoin, a biochemical catalyst that aggressively penetrates deep through the dermal layers and directly into the periosteum, the dense membrane covering the bones. Allantoin acts as a master architect, forcefully commanding the bone cells and torn muscle fibers to rapidly divide, multiply, and fuse back together at a speed that defies modern medical understanding. It is a biological welder, instantly bridging the gap of catastrophic physical trauma. Modern regulatory agencies have fiercely restricted the internal use of this ancient miracle, citing exaggerated toxicities, effectively erasing one of the most profound, instant structural healers ever given to mankind. Venturing further into the unforgiving, sun-baked cliffs of the ancient Levant, we uncover a botanical weapon used by the early desert mystics to instantly neutralize invisible, lethal plagues. We have been taught to fear the microscopic world, relying on synthetic antibiotics that blindly carpet bomb our entire microbiome, destroying our immune systems in the process of killing a single infection. But the ancients utilized the wild, unhybridized ancestor of oregano, extracting a heavy, caustic oil that acts as an instantaneous biological purge. This is not the diluted, pleasant culinary spice sitting in your modern pantry. This is a highly volatile, weaponized resin dripping with a compound called carvacrol. When the ancient healers encountered a patient suffering from a violent, rapid-onset respiratory infection or a lethal parasitic invasion of the gut, they administered microdoses of this burning oil. The moment carvacrol enters the human bloodstream, it acts as a ruthless, targeted assassin. It aggressively hunts down pathogenic bacteria, viruses, and fungal overgrowths, violently breaching their protective cell walls and literally melting the invaders from the inside out upon contact. It does not politely ask the pathogen to stop replicating. It instantly annihilates it, providing immediate, sweeping relief to a suffocating respiratory tract and completely sterilizing a compromised gut. It is an internal, holy fire that instantly purifies the biological vessel, proving that the earth has always possessed the ultimate, instantaneous cure for the plagues that haunt humanity. Leaving the sun-baked cliffs of the ancient Levant, we plunge into the dense, suffocating humidity of the primordial rainforests and the hidden, high-altitude trading routes of the ancient Americas to confront a tree that literally bleeds. In our modern era, millions are quietly suffering from the excruciating, localized agony of severe gastric ulcers, bleeding intestinal walls, and the devastating modern plague known as leaky gut. Modern gastroenterology offers synthetic chemical coatings that merely mask the searing internal fires and block the absorption of vital nutrients, leaving the patient malnourished and perpetually dependent. But the ancient indigenous healers and early botanical explorers commanded the raw, staggering power of the Croton lecleri tree. When the thick, gray bark of this ancient botanical titan is slashed, it weeps a thick, dark crimson resin historically revered as dragon's blood. This is not a mystical metaphor, it is a biological phenomenon. When the ancients encountered severe internal hemorrhaging or massive external lacerations that threatened to invite lethal sepsis, they administered this dark resin. Dragon's blood is overwhelmingly dense with a highly complex alkaloid called taspine alongside massive chains of proanthocyanidins. The moment this liquid resin makes contact with torn human flesh, whether on the skin or deep within the acidic cauldron of the stomach, it acts as an instantaneous, living biological matrix. It aggressively contracts the surrounding tissue, violently pulling the edges of the wound together, and immediately forms a synthetic-like, impenetrable second skin over the injury. It literally knits the shredded lining of the gastrointestinal tract back together in a matter of minutes, sealing the microscopic fissures that allow toxins to leak into the bloodstream. It is an immediate halt to internal bleeding, a botanical sealant that instantly locks out infection and accelerates the deep tissue regeneration process at a speed that renders modern pharmaceutical bandages completely obsolete. From the dark canopy of the bleeding trees, we trace the ancient, overgrown pathways to the tropical highlands, where early healers confronted one of the most agonizing, relentless forms of human suffering, severe cranial nerve pain and lethal dental infections. In antiquity, a rotting tooth or a deep oral abscess was not merely an inconvenience. The proximity to the brain meant it was a rapid, agonizing death sentence. Today, modern dentistry relies on synthetic injections like lidocaine to artificially block nerve channels, leaving the mouth paralyzed and the underlying infection temporarily ignored. But the ancient apothecaries possessed the golden, cone-shaped buds of Spilanthes ecmella, a plant so terrifyingly effective it is known as the toothache plant. When an ancient laborer or king was brought to their knees by the blinding, throbbing agony of an infected nerve, the healer would place a single, fresh bud of this plant against the gum line. The biological reaction is instantaneous and violently electric. Spilanthes contains overwhelming, concentrated levels of an alkylamide called spilanthol. Within seconds of contact, the spilanthol aggressively penetrates the mucosal lining and mainlines directly into the trigeminal nerve. It triggers a violent, vibrating, tingling sensation that completely overloads and shuts down the pain receptors. But it does not stop at mere numbing. Spilanthol aggressively commands the salivary glands to rapidly flush the oral cavity, while simultaneously acting as a fierce, localized antibacterial agent, hunting down and destroying the microscopic pathogens causing the rot. It is an instantaneous, localized nerve block and sterilizer combined, erasing blinding cranial pain in a matter of seconds and stopping lethal infections from breaching the blood-brain barrier. Moving from the localized, stabbing pain of the skull to the systemic, paralyzing shock of the central nervous system, we uncover the sacred botanical known to the Roman legions, the Druids, and early Christian mystics as the herb of the cross. History whispers that this delicate, purple-flowered plant, ancient vervain, was used to staunch the bleeding wounds of Christ on Calvary, imbuing it with profound spiritual weight. But the physical, biochemical reality of vervain is a masterclass in aggressive neurological control. In times of severe physical trauma, hysterical panic, or violent febrile convulsions where the body spikes a lethal fever, the modern medical response is to force synthetic sedatives into the bloodstream, deeply depressing the patient's respiratory system and clouding the mind in a toxic haze. The ancient physicians operated with vastly superior biological intelligence. By brewing a fiercely bitter, dark infusion of wild vervain, they extracted massive quantities of verbinolin and profound iridoid glycosides. When this bitter elixir hits the back of the throat, it bypasses the digestive waiting period and instantly forces the parasympathetic nervous system to violently override the frantic, adrenaline-fueled sympathetic fight or flight response. If a patient was violently shaking from a lethal fever, the vervain commanded the body to instantly open the pores, triggering a massive, rapid sweat that broke the thermal spike in minutes. It acts as a biological circuit breaker, instantly dissolving panic attacks, halting violent muscular spasms, and commanding a frantic, misfiring brain to enter a state of profound, absolute stillness. It does not drug the patient into a stupor. It aggressively restores systemic equilibrium, pulling the human vessel back from the brink of neurological collapse. Ascending from the ancient valleys into the thin, freezing, unforgiving air of the jagged mountain ranges, we encounter a route so fiercely guarded by indigenous shamans that it was considered the literal, physical breath of life. To survive in extreme altitudes or to combat the suffocating grip of severe pneumonia and bronchial spasms, the ancients relied on Osha root, widely revered as bear medicine. When a modern human suffers a severe asthma attack or anaphylactic bronchial constriction, they reach for a plastic inhaler filled with synthetic steroids to artificially force the airways open, often causing severe heart palpitations in the process. The ancient healers, faced with a patient turning blue from oxygen starvation, would rapidly burn the heavy, spicy root of the Osha plant or administer it as a potent, raw tincture. Osha is terrifyingly rich in volatile camphor-like compounds, profound antiviral lactones, and highly specific alkaloids that act as a violent, instantaneous bronchodilator. The exact moment these heavy, aromatic oils hit the respiratory tract, they act like a biological defibrillator for the lungs. They aggressively force the microscopic alveoli, the tiny air sacs within the lungs, to rapidly and violently expand, completely shattering the agonizing grip of a bronchial spasm. Furthermore, the root immediately increases blood circulation directly to the lung tissue, rushing a massive surge of life-giving oxygen into the starving bloodstream. It instantly breaks up hardened, suffocating mucus, allowing the patient to take a deep, clear, resonant breath when mere seconds before they were suffocating in the dark. It is the immediate, aggressive restoration of the human breath, a forgotten mountain miracle that commands the lungs to open and the body to live. Descending from the freezing, thin air of the mountain peaks, we journey into the lush, shaded undergrowth of the ancient European and Asian forests to uncover a botanical assassin used against the most insidious and agonizing of internal invaders. The modern world is suffering an epidemic of severe, chronic digestive distress, bloating, and systemic immune collapse, often entirely unaware that their internal ecosystem has been violently hijacked by highly evolved parasitic worms and relentless fungal overgrowths. Modern pharmacology attacks these invaders with highly toxic synthetic anthelmintics that ruthlessly strip the entire gut microbiome, destroying the good bacteria along with the bad and leaving the liver deeply toxified. The ancient healers, however, possessed a fiercely bitter, incredibly potent botanical weapon known as tansy. This bright, golden-buttoned flower is not a gentle herbal tea. It is a violent biological purgative. Tansy contains concentrated, terrifyingly high levels of a volatile compound called thujone, specifically beta-thujone, alongside powerful bitter principles like tenacitin. When the ancient physicians administered a highly controlled, microdose tincture of wild tansy, it acted as a targeted biological nerve agent specifically designed to eradicate internal parasites. The moment the heavy thujone compounds enter the digestive tract, they aggressively penetrate the nervous systems of roundworms, tapeworms, and pervasive fungal colonies. It violently paralyzes the invaders, completely detaching their grip from the intestinal walls. Simultaneously, the extreme bitterness of the tenacitin instantly triggers a massive, sweeping wave of muscular contractions throughout the colon, forcefully and rapidly expelling the paralyzed pathogens from the human vessel. It is an instantaneous, aggressive internal cleansing, a calculated biological strike that literally purges the body of the hidden, creeping death that steals human vitality from the inside out. Finally, we arrive at the absolute pinnacle of ancient rapid-healing botany, a plant so profoundly revered that it was named the cure-all in the medieval apothecaries and was dedicated to the Virgin Mary for its perceived divine power to resurrect failing organs. Today, the human liver, the grand, unsung alchemist of the body, is slowly suffocating under the immense weight of modern, highly processed diets, heavy metals, and ubiquitous environmental toxins. When the liver begins to fail, the entire biological system slowly crashes, resulting in chronic fatigue, severe jaundice, and the slow poisoning of the blood. Modern medicine has no synthetic drug to regenerate a dying liver. They can only offer supportive care or surgical transplants. But the ancient world possessed the fiercely resilient, thorny titan known as Milk Thistle. The secret lies entirely in its hard, dark seeds. When these ancient seeds were crushed, they released massive, overwhelming concentrations of a profound, highly complex flavonoid called silymarin. When an ancient healer administered this raw, crushed seed to a patient suffering from lethal mushroom poisoning or the agonizing throes of acute hepatic failure, the biological intervention was nothing short of miraculous. Silymarin acts as an instantaneous, impenetrable biological shield for the liver. It aggressively alters the outer cell membrane of the hepatocytes, the liver cells, literally preventing toxic chemicals from breaching the cell wall. But far more astonishingly, it instantly penetrates the nucleus of the damaged liver cells and violently stimulates RNA polymerase I. This is the exact biological switch that commands the liver to rapidly synthesize new, healthy proteins. Milk Thistle does not just protect the liver, it forcefully commands the dying organ to aggressively regenerate its own tissue, knitting new, vibrant cells together to replace the necrotic, rotting flesh. It is an internal resurrection protocol, the ultimate botanical proof that the earth holds the power to instantly reverse the decay of the human machine. These 10 lost medicinal plants are not myths, folklore, or outdated superstitions. They are the stolen, suppressed architectural blueprints of divine human health. The modern medical establishment has spent over a century engineering an empire of synthetic dependence, meticulously hiding the truth that the most terrifyingly effective, rapid healing compounds were perfected by the earth millions of years ago. They have convinced you that your body is inherently weak, flawed, and absolutely incapable of defending or repairing itself without their slow, expensive, artificial interventions. But the buried medical archives, the shadowed apothecary texts, and the blood-soaked soils of history scream a very different, undeniable truth. The blueprints for an indestructible, fiercely resilient, rapidly healing human vessel are still growing wildly in the forgotten corners of the earth, waiting patiently for you to remember them. By boldly reclaiming these 10 botanical titans, you do not just survive the modern world, you biologically dominate it, taking absolute control over your own cellular destiny. Do not let this vital, life-saving knowledge remain buried in the darkness of forgotten history. Your dying cells are desperate for the ancient, divine alchemy they were originally designed to run on. Take your stand against the fragile, synthetic illusions of the modern age and join our fiercely growing, awakened community. Subscribe to Lone Oak Remedies right now, and together, let us relentlessly uncover the ancient path to a body instantaneously rebuilt, an immune system weaponized, and a spirit completely and eternally renewed by the hidden wisdom of the ancients.